The night was alive with fire. Torches lit the snow, casting long shadows across Red Hollow. 4 riders stormed down the street, their leader shouting a single name. Silver Wolf, come out and meet your grave inside the cabin. A widow clutched her child, breath shallow. Outside, the silent cowboy stepped into the glow, revolver heavy in his hand. What happened next would burn itself into legend and leave the whole town forever changed. This is WestDream Tales, where the untold stories of the Wild West come alive. Tales of love, loss, and redemption, told like never before. Now, let's ride into today's story. The wind cut across the Red Hollow Cemetery. Dust swirled between the wooden crosses, rattling the wreaths of withered flowers. A coffin lowered slowly into the frozen earth. Evelyn Hart stood motionless, her black veil trembling in the gust. She held her son close, the boy's small hands clutching her dress with desperate strength. Her face was pale, but her eyes held back no tears they had already run dry. The preacher's voice carried faintly, drowned by the groaning of the wind. Men kept their hats low. Women whispered behind gloved fingers, words sharp enough to cut through the silence. She won't last the winter, one muttered. Not without land, not without a man, another replied. The whispers grew like vines, wrapping around Evelyn until her breath shook. Her husband, Matthew, had died only 3 nights earlier, thrown from a horse while crossing the Stonebend River. His body struck the rocks, and the current carried him away before anyone could pull him back. Evelyn had not even seen his face at the end, only a mangled form laid upon the muddy bank, water streaming from his open mouth. Her life had been broken in a single night. Now she was a widow at 26, alone in a town that had no place for widows, and the boy beside her, Samuel, was barely 4 years old. The law in Red Hollow was unwritten, yet everyone obeyed it. A woman without kin, without land, without a husband, had no standing. She was little more than a shadow. The church offered charity for 3 days, no more. After that, she would be on her own. In the dead of winter, that meant certain death. That night, Evelyn lay awake inside a torn canvas tent near the edge of town. Snow crept through the seams, settling on her blanket like a thin veil of ice. She pressed her child to her chest, whispering prayers he could not hear. The wind howled, rattling the stakes of the tent. Samuel stirred, muttering in his sleep, lips blue from the cold. Evelyn clenched her jaw, fighting tears she could no longer afford to shed. Survival demanded something she dreaded. She would have to take a husband not for love, but for shelter. It was the only way to keep the boy alive. The very next morning, a name rose in the whispers of town: Cole Granger, the silent cowboy. He lived at the far edge of Red Hollow, in a house built of weathered pine, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray in his beard and ice in his stare. He spoke to no one, except when forced. Rumors trailed behind him like dust behind a wagon. Some said he had killed more men than cholera. Others swore he once carried a bounty larger than $10,000, but he had disappeared years ago, bearing his guns in his past. Now, he tilled a patch of stubborn soil, barely enough to survive. The people of Red Hollow gave him distance, as if silence itself were contagious. That morning, Cole stepped into the churchyard. His boots left heavy marks in the snow. Without a word, he looked at Evelyn, then at the child clinging to her skirts. The offer came bluntly, almost harshly. Marriage, not for passion, not for pride, but for survival. The town buzzed like a hive of wasps. A widow, with the silent cowboy, she'll be dead before spring. Someone scoffed. Another sneered. Better the wolf than the snow, I suppose. Evelyn's heart twisted. The thought of binding herself to this man was terrifying, but the thought of bearing her child was worse. 3 nights later, the wedding took place inside the same church where Matthew's coffin had been blessed. There were no flowers, no music, no feast, only the preacher, a Bible, and the silent figure standing at Evelyn's side. Cole never spoke a vow. He only gave a nod, slow and final. Evelyn's voice trembled as she forced the words from her lips. I do. The marriage was sealed, and the whispers grew into laughter outside. The crowd scattered, leaving the widow and the gunslinger alone. Evelyn felt the walls closing in around her. That night, The first night under his roof, the house groaned like an old man in pain. A single lantern lit the room, shadows stretching across the rough-hewn walls. Cole hung his gun belt on a nail, the revolver gleaming like a sleeping beast. Evelyn sat on the bed, clutching Samuel against her chest. She watched the man move with heavy steps, silent as a stone. When he finally lay down on the floorboards with a blanket, her fear deepened. The air was thick with unspoken history. Every crack in the wood seemed to whisper the word killer. Every flicker of the lantern seemed to reveal the scars etched across his hands. Samuel stirred in his sleep, his small voice breaking the silence. Evelyn stroked his hair, fighting the tremor in her fingers. She told herself survive tonight, and then the next. Cole's breathing was steady, slow, almost too controlled, as though he were awake, even with eyes closed. The revolver on the wall shone dully in the half-light, a reminder of who he truly was. Outside, snow thickened over the valley, burying fences and rooftops alike. The storm would last for weeks, and Evelyn Hart, widow-turned-bride, understood the truth. She had not married safety. She had married danger, wrapped in silence. The kind of silence that could kill, but she also understood something else. Her child was warm tonight, and alive. For now, that was enough. The first chapter of her new life had begun. Not with hope, but with dread. Not with love, but with necessity. And yet, somewhere beneath that dread, a question lingered. What had Cole Granger buried in his silence, and how long before it clawed its way back into the light? The storm outside howled louder, rattling every shutter. Inside, Evelyn closed her eyes, clutching her boy close. She prayed the roof would hold, but deep in her heart, she knew. It was not the storm outside she should fear. It was the storm that lived inside the man she had just married. Cole Granger was not born in silence. Long before Red Hollow, his name carried weight across deserts and border towns. People called him Silver Wolf, a legend carved from smoke and blood. He grew up on the plains of Nevada, son of a drifter. His father was a gambler, his mother gone before he learned her voice. By 16, Cole already held a revolver tighter than he held hope. The West shaped him hard. He rode with cattle drivers, slept in arroyos, and fought for scraps. Every scar on his body came with a story whispered around campfires. The legend began in a dusty town called Mesa Crossing. A drunken sheriff pulled a gun on a boy. Cole stepped in, shot true, and left the lawman bleeding on the boards. From then on, his path was sealed. Every man with a gun wanted to test him. Every outlaw either feared him or followed him. By 20, his face was on posters across Arizona territory. $10,000 for his capture, dead or alive. The bounty drew hunters like flies to a carcass. Cole survived each attempt. He became quicker, colder, sharper than the rest. But with each kill, silence grew heavier in his chest. One night in El Verde, it all changed. A gang ambushed him outside the saloon, torches burning the dark. Bullets flew, and by dawn 12 men lay dead in the dust. Among them was Jared Crow's brother. Jared himself crawled away with a shattered shoulder. His vow for vengeance echoed in Cole's memory long after the smoke cleared. Cole rode away from El Verde with blood caked on his boots. He crossed 3 states under false names, and somewhere along the line, he simply stopped speaking. No one knew why. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe the silence was safer than words. By the time he reached Red Hollow, the gunslinger was gone. In his place stood a man who wanted nothing but to disappear. But the past never truly vanished. It only waited. Evelyn Hart's story ran on a different road, yet pain carved it just as deep. She was born in Charleston, daughter of a Methodist preacher. Her world was hymns, candlelight, and polished pews, but she longed for more than sermons. When she met Matthew, a young carpenter with wild ideas, she saw escape. Together they dreamed of a new start in the frontier lands. They sold what little they had, joined a wagon train bound for the far territories. Hunger, dust, and sickness traveled with them across endless miles. Still, Evelyn held hope. Each night, she imagined the small house Matthew promised. A garden, a cradle by the window, a life away from judgment. But the Stone Bend River took it all. One slip, one scream, and the current swallowed him. Evelyn was left clutching a child and a prayer. The wagon master pushed her aside. "No man, no land," he said. By the time she staggered into Red Hollow, she was already an outcast. The town had seen widows before. Most did not last long. A few remarried. Many simply vanished. Evelyn refused to vanish. Samuel's breath was her only anchor. She would endure anything if it meant keeping him alive. That was why she agreed to Cole's offer. Not out of faith, not out of comfort, but because the grave was colder than his silence. Life in Cole's cabin was a battle of shadows. He rose before dawn, chopping wood until sweat froze on his beard. Evelyn cooked thin stews, stretching flour and beans like thread. They rarely spoke. A nod from him, a whispered prayer from her. Between them, silence lay thicker than the snow on the roof. Yet signs of something human bled through. Cole repaired the leaking roof without a word. He placed extra logs near the hearth when Samuel coughed at night. Evelyn noticed the small things, how he flinched at the crack of distant gunfire, how his hand hovered near the revolver, even in sleep. There was a night when Samuel wandered outside. The boy followed a lantern glow into the barn. Cole found him shivering in the hay and carried him back inside. Evelyn watched closely. In Cole's arms, the boy looked safe, almost cherished. But the moment passed, and the mask of silence returned. The town of Red Hollow fed on gossip like cattle on grass. By January, whispers circled faster than the snowstorms. "Silver Wolf lives among us," some said. Evelyn caught fragments while buying flour. Men spoke of El Verde, of 12 bodies, of a bounty still unclaimed. Her stomach tightened, but she stayed silent. One evening, Samuel asked, "Mama, why doesn't he talk?" Evelyn froze. She had no answer. Inside, she wrestled with the truth. She had married a man carved from violence, but she also saw the weary kindness buried beneath his scars. For now, survival demanded she stay. For now, winter demanded she trust him. But deep down, Evelyn knew the past was circling. The snow would melt. Old enemies would ride again. And when they came, silence alone would not save them. The winter deepened, burying Red Hollow under drifts taller than a man. The air was sharp, cutting skin like glass. But danger was not carried in the snow it rode on the wind. It began with tracks outside the cabin, boot prints too large to be Cole's, circling in the night. By morning, they vanished under fresh powder, but Evelyn saw them first. Cole said nothing. He only touched the revolver on the wall, eyes narrowing. The silence between them thickened with dread. 3 days later, riders appeared at the edge of town. 4 men, faces hidden under wide hats. Their leader carried a scar that tore through his cheek like lightning. Jared Crow. The name spread faster than fire. Whispers said he had come from El Verde, following a trail of ghosts. Evelyn heard the gossip in the general store. Black Fang, they called him now. The outlaw who swore to kill the Silver Wolf. She felt her chest tighten, her pulse quicken. The past was no longer a shadow, it was here, breathing, and her home had become the bait. The first confrontation came in the marketplace. Evelyn carried a basket, Samuel clutching her hand. Jared blocked the path, grinning with teeth yellowed by whiskey. "Well, look here," he sneered. The preacher's daughter, married to a ghost. He bent low, his breath sour with smoke. Evelyn forced herself not to flinch. "Step aside," she said, steady though her knees shook. The boy hid behind her skirt, eyes wide. Jared chuckled. "Tell your silent husband the past don't forgive. I'll be seeing him soon." When Cole heard, his jaw tightened. He loaded his revolver with deliberate care. Not a word escaped his lips, but his eyes burned. That night, the cabin windows rattled. Stones struck the walls, and nailed to the door was a scrap of paper. "Silver Wolf, come claim your grave." Evelyn tore it down, her hands trembling. Cole stared at the message, then at his wife. The weight of his silence crushed her more than any words could. Red Hollow began to change. Neighbors who once only whispered now avoided her completely. Mothers pulled children aside when she walked down the street. The sheriff offered nothing but cowardice. "Not my fight," he muttered, spitting tobacco. "You married him, you live with it. Isolation wrapped around Evelyn like a rope, but inside the cabin, cracks of humanity still showed. One night, Cole laid his coat across her shoulders without a word. Samuel crawled onto his lap once, asking for a story. Cole hesitated, throat working. No words came, but his arms closed protectively around the boy. Evelyn's fear tangled with reluctant trust. This man, both shield and storm, was now all she had. But the storm outside was gathering. The attacks grew bolder. Livestock found slaughtered in the snow. Barn doors ripped off their hinges. Horses gone. Jared's men wanted blood, but they wanted fear first. They circled the cabin at night, torches flickering. Voices jeered in the darkness, taunting. Evelyn held Samuel close, heart hammering. Cole sat at the window, revolver on his knee. His eyes never left the firelight outside. One night, a bullet cracked through the shutter. The lamp shattered, flames licking the floor. Cole stamped it out while Evelyn smothered Samuel's cries. The next morning, townsfolk shook their heads. They'll burn him out before long. No one offered help. Despite the terror, something changed between husband and wife. Fear became thread, stitching them together. Evelyn began to see not just the killer, but the man beneath. She noticed how he limped slightly from an old wound, how he stood outside in storms, facing the night alone, how his silence was less pride than punishment. One evening, she asked softly, "Why won't you speak?" Cole's gaze flickered, but no sound came. Instead, he handed her his revolver, as if entrusting his soul. The weight in her hands startled her. She realized it was not just a weapon, it was his history, his burden, and now it was partly hers. Then came the fire. The barn lit up like dawn, flames devouring beams and hay. Evelyn screamed, rushing to drag water. Cole charged into the blaze, dragging horses out by the reins. Smoke blackened his face, sparks scorching his coat. He emerged coughing, arms trembling but alive. The barn collapsed behind him, a thunder of sparks against the night. Samuel cried, clinging to Evelyn, and for the first time, she saw tears streaking Cole's soot-stained cheeks. The next day, Jared rode boldly into town. He tipped his hat to Evelyn, mocking, "Tell your husband his time is almost up." The sheriff looked away. Merchants closed their doors. Fear ruled Red Hollow now. Evelyn returned home with dread clawing at her. She knew the storm had reached its peak. Soon, the silence would have to break. The night was heavy with silence. Red Hollow lay under a pale moon, the streets empty, the windows dark. But everyone was awake, waiting for the sound of death. Jared Crow made his move at sundown. He and his men dragged torches through the snow. The glow painted the town blood red as they rode toward Cole's cabin. Inside, Evelyn held Samuel close. Her heart hammered as she listened to hoofbeats drawing near. Cole buckled his gun belt, his face carved from stone. He looked at her once, eyes steady. No words came, only a silent promise. Evelyn understood it was the look of a man prepared to die. The front door shook under fists. Voices roared from outside. "Silver Wolf, come, meet your grave." Cole opened the door slowly. The cold rushed in, filling the room like a tide. He stepped out, revolver hanging at his side. The town gathered in the shadows. Faces peered from behind shutters, from the edges of alleys. No one dared intervene, but no one could look away. Jared dismounted, his scar gleaming in the firelight. "You should have stayed dead," he hissed. "Tonight I bury you myself." Cole said nothing. He simply raised his weapon, the barrel glinting like ice. The standoff had begun. The first shot cracked like thunder. Snow exploded from the ground. People gasped, clutching each other in the dark. Jared's men rushed forward, guns blazing. Cole moved with deadly calm, every step precise. One fell with a bullet to the chest. Another spun lifeless into the snow. Torches tumbled, sparks scattering across the street. The smell of gunpowder choked the air. Samuel cried inside the cabin, his voice muffled by Evelyn's embrace. A third outlaw swung his rifle. Cole ducked low, fired once. The man crumpled into the drift, blood steaming on the snow. Now only Jared remained. The scarred man snarled, hate burning in his eyes. "You took my brother. Tonight I take everything from you." They circled each other in the street. Boots crunched on ice, breaths rising in clouds. The crowd held its breath as if the world had stopped turning. Jared fired first. Cole staggered as the bullet tore into his shoulder. Blood bloomed through his coat, but his stance held firm. Evelyn screamed from the doorway. Samuel sobbed, reaching for the man who was no longer just a stranger. But Cole did not falter. He steadied his aim. The world narrowed to a single line of sight. His finger tightened on the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and final. Jared's eyes went wide. He dropped to his knees, then collapsed face first into the snow. Silence fell. Only the hiss of torches breaking into embers filled the night. The legend of the Silver Wolf had returned for one last kill. Cole swayed, blood dripping from his arm. He fell to one knee, his revolver clattering against the ice. Evelyn ran to him, Samuel clutching her skirt. She caught him before he collapsed. "Stay with me," she pleaded, tears burning her cheeks. Cole's lips parted, the first words in years rasping free. "I'm sorry." The sound was broken, raw, but it was more precious than gold. Evelyn held him tighter. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," she whispered. Her voice steadied his trembling hands. The townsfolk crept closer, their fear shifting into awe. They had seen the storm unleashed and survived its passing. The silent cowboy was no longer a ghost, he was flesh, blood, and redemption. By dawn, Jared's body lay cold outside the saloon, his men buried by the edge of town, nameless, forgotten. The snow covered them quickly, as if the earth itself wanted them gone. Cole rested inside the cabin, shoulder bound in cloth. Evelyn sat beside him, her hand never leaving his. Samuel dozed in a chair, his small chest rising and falling in peace. Outside, Red Hollow whispered a new story. The widow who married the silent man, the gunslinger who fought one last time, not for blood, but for family. The snow melted slowly in Red Hollow. Drifts shrank, rivers loosened, and the valley breathed again. But the scars of blood on the street remained long after the thaw. Cole rested in the cabin, arm bound tight. Evelyn nursed him through fevered nights. Each dawn, she feared his breath might fail, but each dawn he endured. Samuel never left his side. The boy brought water, tried to mimic bandages with clumsy hands. Cole would almost smile, though his lips barely moved. Days stretched into weeks. Outside, the town spoke of little else. Some cursed his name, others whispered gratitude. The sheriff claimed he had kept order, though everyone knew the truth. Merchants reopened shops but cast wary glances toward the cabin. Red Hollow balanced between fear and reluctant respect. Inside, silence softened. Evelyn no longer feared the man's presence. She began to read aloud at night, her voice filling the space words had once abandoned. Cole listened, eyes half closed. He said nothing, but the rhythm of her story steadied him. It was the first time silence felt like peace. One evening, she caught him watching her. His gaze was not of a killer, but of a man stripped bare. Her chest tightened with a feeling she had not allowed before. They spoke with gestures more than words. A hand brushing against hers, a coat draped gently over her shoulders. The bond deepened in the small spaces between. The townsfolk slowly approached. First, a loaf of bread left on the step. Then, firewood stacked quietly near the fence. Fear gave way to something else. The widow and the silent cowboy were no longer outcasts. They had become part of Red Hollow's tale. Children whispered of the duel as if it were legend. Men at the saloon spoke of the wolf who laid down his teeth. Women told each other Evelyn's courage saved the cabin more than his gun. The story grew larger than life. It rode on wagons, traveled by mail, and spread down the railway line. By spring, strangers arrived just to see where the snow had burned red. Cole's recovery was slow but steady. His arm healed stiff, his movements slower. Yet there was strength in the way he lived each day. He began to mend fences, repair tools, tend to the land. Samuel followed him step for step, learning by imitation. The boy laughed more, fear melting from his eyes. Evelyn watched from the porch. The sound of laughter filled what once was a house of silence. Her heart, once brittle, grew roots again. She still remembered Matthew, the man she lost, but grief no longer drowned her. Instead, it became a gentle echo, guiding her toward the present. Spring unfolded into summer. The valley turned green, wildflowers bursting from the soil. Life returned, bold and unashamed. One evening, the town gathered for a church supper. Evelyn and Cole arrived together, Samuel between them. The crowd fell quiet, then parted to let them pass. For the first time, Evelyn felt no eyes of pity, only eyes of recognition. Cole stood tall, silent, but no longer alone. When the preacher spoke, he paused at the sight of them. His words softened, touched with awe. The Lord finds ways to turn even the darkest past into light. Evelyn squeezed Cole's hand under the table. For the first time, he squeezed back. The gesture carried more than words ever could. But peace was not free. At night, Cole still woke with shadows in his eyes. The ghosts of El Verde did not vanish with Jared. Evelyn would rise, sit beside him, and rest her hand on his chest. Her touch steadied his breath, pulled him back from the abyss. Together, they faced the silence of nightmares. Samuel sometimes woke to hear whispers he could not understand. The boy would slip between them, arms spread wide. In those moments, a family was forged not by blood, but by choice. Years passed like turning pages. Red Hollow changed, but it remembered. Children grew, and Samuel became a writer strong and sure. Cole aged, beard silvered, hands slower with work. Evelyn's hair darkened with streaks of gray, but her spirit stayed firm. They lived not as shadows, but as part of the valley. Travelers still came, asking about the duel, the silent cowboy, the widow. Some wanted proof of legends, others only wanted hope. Evelyn would smile faintly, shake her head. Some stories are not about guns, she'd say. They're about surviving long enough to find each other. In time, even Cole's silence softened. On rare nights, words returned in fragments. A name spoken, a memory confessed, a prayer muttered under breath. Each word was a gift. Each word stitched wounds invisible to the eye. Evelyn treasured them as if they were jewels. The cabin became more than shelter. It became a sanctuary, built from ashes and dawn, proof that love could take root in the harshest soil. The duel of Red Hollow faded into history, but the widow and the silent cowboy endured beyond it. Their lives became a quiet testimony. For those who listened, the lesson was clear. The West was not only built by bullets, it was also built by those who chose to lay them down. This was WestDream Tales, a story of silence, survival, and love forged in fire. If it moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so the spirit of the West will keep riding with us. Until the next tale, ride safe.